We are live. Welcome back to the After Action Project. This is episode 106. Tonight we are joined by Gil Narvaez of Fortitude Consulting, and we're going to be talking about his Technical Carbine Skills course. If you like what we're doing and would like to throw us some free support and appreciation, we would greatly appreciate a 5-star review on iTunes or wherever you listen to this podcast. If you'd like to help out with financial contribution, you can do that by visiting patreon.com/afteractionproject. Big thank you and shout out to our current Patreon supporters through there. After Action Project is brought to you in part by the Range Buddy app and Locked In Shooting Grip, as well as the Firearms Radio Network. Be sure to check out the other great podcasts on the Firearms Radio Network by visiting firearmsradio.net. Have you ever lost that perfect grip after shooting multiple rounds, or had your sweaty grip diminish the ability to hang onto your firearm in different weather conditions? Locked In Grip is a grip enhancer that keeps your hands free of moisture to create a slip-free connection to the action of shooting your firearm. Locked In Grip Liquid Shooting Sports Chalk is made for shooters by shooters. That's brought to us by the folks over there at the Complete Combatant. Visit lockedingrip.com. That's lockedingrip.com to purchase your liquid shooting sports chalk now. And out here in the desert heat, one of the things that I've gotten a lot better at over the last decade of remembering to do is apply sunscreen on my face and my hands. But one of the things that does, it just kind of creates like this oily mess on my hands. So I dab on a little bit of that Locked In Grip there, rub it in the hands, and it helps clear that issue up right away. Because inevitably, what I'll do is I'll put on the spray sunscreen right before I start demo and shoot the first demo of the day. And I'm like, oh, great. Here I am gripping this gun with an oily mess on my hands, trying not to look like I know what I'm doing in front of a group of students. So check out lockedingrip.com to get your liquid shooting sports chalk. Our other show sponsor is the Range Buddy app. You guys have heard me talking about it before. I think it's a great app, partly because I'm the dude behind it. It's a collection of over 160 shooting or handgun shooting drills, also all sorted by the required target type and filterable by the skills worked. We just rolled out the Range Buddy instructor marketplace, so there's quite a few great instructors on there that you can look up and you can train with either locally or online. If you would like, there are some folks that are offering some like video analysis. So if you want to do get a draw analysis to help improve your draw stroke, or you're presenting your handgun from consultant, there are a few folks in there offering that. There's a virtual instructor, rangebuddy.app, as it's available on Android and iOS. So let's get into tonight's episode. Gil, introduce yourself to our listeners. Talk to us a little bit about your background in the firearms training world and what, I guess, led to you starting Fortitude Consulting and the Technical Carbine Skills course that we're going to talk about today.
So as far as my background, I am a retired career law enforcement officer. I retired as a lieutenant with the Charlotte-Mecklenburg Police Department here in Charlotte, North Carolina. Did 26 years with them. I'm working on my 28th year in law enforcement. I'm currently a part-time officer on a smaller agency here in Mecklenburg County. Over 20 of those years as a law enforcement officer, I've been training in some form or fashion. I was also a Marine Corps veteran, didn't do anything grown and sexy in the Marine Corps. I was actually a motor T mechanic, but I mention that because that is where my first exposure to things like dry fire and a push to excellence when it comes to marksmanship and marksmanship fundamentals. That's where I was kind of introduced to that. I'm an active competitive shooter. I am actually an A-class USPSA carry optic shooter, and I'm a master class carry optic shooter in IDPA. Back in 2018, I recognized that, as one of the reasons, as corny as it sounds, one of the reasons why I became a cop was to be there for the individual that is not able to defend themselves, that needs someone to actually protect them. And after a couple of decades on the job, I quickly realized that there were a handful of instances as a law enforcement officer that I was actually able to intervene and keep someone from becoming a victim of a serious crime. And after talking about it to my wife and already having done a few private training sessions with some folks and helping them build their skill set up so that they were more prepared to handle themselves, it became quickly apparent that it would be a good idea for us to start a company and for me to start doing open enrollment courses as an outlet for me to be able to help good people be as dangerous as they possibly could be, so that they could handle the first 5, 6, 7 minutes of a critical incident and actually protect themselves and their families. That was the crux of where Fortitude Consulting actually began, where it blossomed from. In addition to that, I've been a staff instructor with Modern Samurai Project, leading MSP classes, both the RDS Performance and Fundamentals, as well as their instructor course. And I had the honor and opportunity to train with Scott in his very first open enrollment course back in 2017. That's kind of what led me down the path of the dot, if you will.
That's awesome. I appreciate that. Tim, talk to us a little bit about your background in the firearms training world and what brought you to Gil's Technical Carbine Skills course.
All right. So I'm Tim Corradino. I've been with a Metro Atlanta Police Department since 2010. Currently, I supervise one of the supervisors over our firearms training unit. And we teach everything from in-service related qualifications and kind of tune-up training through recruits, from basic firearms through advanced firearms. And we put on patrol rifle, all that sort of shotgun type courses. I was an instructor for about 3 years, from 2015 to 2018, before I kind of moved around the department and then made my way back to firearms in 2022. While at the department, I had the honor of serving on our SWAT team for a while. So I had experience both on the entry side and the sniper team side. So got exposed to a lot of good training there. And, you know, one thing I'm very fortunate with my department is that they send us to training, right? Which is crazy for some police departments to actually send their folks outside of the bubble of instructors there and learn from the outside world. So, you know, we as a unit got to travel to meet Gil for the first time. I believe it was September of last year, up in Tennessee with his Modern Samurai Project course. My department recently, we've been transitioning over to red dots, so getting us more exposure and more training to outside instructors who teach this and have mastered, you know, this technology and can help us to provide our officers with some better training on it. That was a huge goal. So, you know, we got that first course under our belts, and then this year, back in March, we got to go to his technical carbine course. And, you know, Gil sets a good tone in his class. And obviously it impressed us so much that we made sure to budget for it again for 2024 and made our way back there. And now we've worked through the process of bringing him over to our department to teach, hopefully next year, get some courses on the books here locally. But yeah, it's been a long, fun journey, and looking forward to talking about kind of what I learned and what I brought back from Gil's training.
Man, it's cool to hear that your department is kind of forward thinking on that and getting you folks out there to receive some additional training outside of the, I guess, what's typically taught inside the institutions or, you know, inside the department. Gil, talk to us a little bit about the course requirements. You know, what gear do the students need to bring with them? What are the minimum requirements for attending the course? Is it a 1 day, a 2 day, all that good stuff?
So our Technical Carbine Skills is our flagship carbine course. It is where we're essentially starting. We build a foundation with the fundamentals from the ground up, no different than what we do with pistol. Like to start out with body mechanics. This is an area that I think most shooters, even those with what they would consider to be a tremendous amount of experience, they kind of gloss over and really somewhat miss the boat on really getting those foundational skills on the way the body works and placing yourself in the strongest position possible to get as much structure behind the gun as possible. We also we build off of that and go into some performance training as well. It's a 2-day course, which allows us the opportunity to really dig deep into those foundational concepts, so that we've got that day for the clients to walk away and kind of digest what we worked on. And then when we come back in day 2, that's when we start stepping things up and we start talking about things like navigating environments, crowded environments with the actual long gun, what makes sense, some of the things that we've seen and heard in the past that may initially sound like a good idea, but when you really start digging into it, you understand that it's not the most efficient way of moving in or around people. And then we do a little bit of performance shooting as well. We end the course with a couple of runs on a stage where we test all of the skills from mounting the gun to using your vision appropriately, and also knowing exactly how you're going to shoot different targets of different conformation levels. As far as what the course requirements are, you just need to have kit that runs. Make sure that you don't have an optic or a light or some other gizmo or whiz bang that's going to fall off of your gun in the middle of the class, which happens quite often. That in and of itself is a lesson. But above and beyond that, there's really no like marksmanship requirement or anything like that. The way I work, I could care less whether you come to me as a novice marksman or if you come to me as a very experienced shooter that's got quite a bit of the fundamentals dialed in. My absolute requirement when it comes to attendance in a course is just responsible gun handling. As long as you're handling the gun responsibly, we can deal with anything above and beyond that.
That makes sense. Tim, talk to us a little bit about the gear that you were running during that class and if there's any changes that you would have made to your gear selection.
So pretty much, we had debated bringing up, plate carriers and all that. We ended up running slick, but I brought up my old entry rifle. It was an LWRC, 10.5-inch barrel with a Surefire can on it, EOTech for the optic, a Surefire with pressure pad activation, VTAC sling, all that sort of stuff. So I just wanted to run that rifle, aggressively. It was my baby while I was on the team. And, just our department at the time, we're transitioning to short-barreled rifles with suppressors. So just kind of running these and seeing what we could incorporate in a future transition courses was why I picked that particular platform. And the big change I made from it was I removed the handguard first and foremost, just to get that better leverage when I was mounting the rifle, kind of being able to keep it in my shoulder good and tight as we were running these different drills with some more aggressive conformation levels and kind of locking it in place. Allowed me to run that rifle with a lot more confidence. So I kind of got to see where some of my gear setup failed me and what adjustments I had to make. Huge learning point there.
Gil, I want to dig into something that Tim talked about or mentioned briefly in his gear selection, and that's the slings. Talk to us a little about sling selection for students. Is that something that you see folks getting wrong? Folks showing up with single point instead of a better option. What and kind of how? Talk to us a little bit how students should kind of figure out what type of sling is best for them.
So that's an interesting dynamic. We've offered technical carbine skills from the very start of Fortitude back in 2018. And I've seen a very, very distinct progression over the years. Back in the day, we would have quite a few people come to us with non-adjustable slings. We had folks come to us with 1-point slings, 3-point slings, things that just were not in any way, shape, or form ideal. The last couple of years, I think we've kind of turned a corner Most of the folks that are coming out to train are rocking 2-point slings. Most of them have padded slings. The good majority of them are thinking about how they are mounting the gun. There are 2 sling designs, one being the T-Rex arms that allows you to loosen this or adjust the sling going forward so that your hand is already on the front of the handguard. The T10 sling that I've got does that as well. So that's something that we've seen a big change in lately. Most folks are buying some really, really good kit. That is the one thing that I've rarely, the last couple of years, have had to make any recommendations or adjustments on with the folks that are coming to the class. Sling use, I can tell you right now from my perspective, I absolutely hate slings. And it's something that I talk about in class. I do not like slings. If I could navigate the world without a sling on my long gun, I probably would. The unfortunate truth is it's a necessary evil, though. They do have their place, particularly in a training environment where you are working with the gun for hours on end. You absolutely have to have them, but some are better than others. My personal preference is a padded 2-point sling. I'm not really married to a particular manufacturer, but I've got a couple that are on the guns that I'm just kind of working through.
That makes sense, and it's reassuring to know that it's kind of we've turned that corner. It'll be interesting to see when we turn the corner back and go the other way.
You know, now that you mentioned that, I think that's inevitable with the realization here personally that we are still having a conversation on the internet about things like point shooting in firearms training. That absolutely blows my mind. Sure. So I agree with you. It'll probably come back around again one day. Hopefully, once we are long done training.
Oh no, it'll be next week.
The 1-point sling is the hotness.
Yes, exactly. Tim, talk to us a little bit about what the first part or the first day of that class looks like after the range safety brief and all of that kind of the formal stuff that goes on in most reputable courses. What does it look like once you guys get on the line and really start running some drills?
So one of the things I really like about how Gil sets up his courses, there's a little bit of talking, but then there's a lot of shooting to reinforce the lessons. You're constantly, loading up your mags, do a quick debrief, couple of talking points here and there, quick demonstrations, and Gil uses the students to, kind of make his points with building your structure behind the gun, how to leverage things properly. And then we go right into a couple of drills that he sets up. So, in terms of the foundation, it's laid pretty well throughout that whole, first half of the day. And then as the day progresses, you start to get into different types of reps. Like, you understand the basics of we shouldn't have to keep correcting, squaring up your hips, squaring up your shoulders, where you're kind of mounting the rifle to get as much meat behind the stock as you can. Now we could start talking about different ways to get the gun loaded when you're at bolt lock, going high port, keeping it mounted with cheek weld on the stock, and kind of exploring a little bit of movement with that. So it's, it's kind of a slow, not slow in a bad sense, but we do the crawl, walk, run model in his classes. But day one, it's a lot of just those basic fundamentals. And then, day two, you hit the ground running and it just builds.
One of the things that I forgot to talk about or forgot to ask earlier, is this a law enforcement only course or is it open enrollment, Gil?
It is not. It is an open enrollment course. It was designed from the very beginning to be for folks that literally have the fundamentals of being able to load the gun, mount the gun, and fire a shot and actually hit a target and take them beyond that. What I found, though, is that most, if not all, of the law enforcement officers that do end up coming through the course find tremendous benefit in it. It speaks volumes to the idea, and it's kind of been my training philosophy from the very beginning, that there's brilliance in the basics. If you take the basics and you push them and distill them as deep as you possibly can and get down into the minutia of them, even somebody that, qualified as a SWAT, patrol rifle officer guy 10, 15 years ago, they can still get quite a bit out of the training.
One of the things that I struggle with when I'm looking at, setting up my training budget for the year between the time and the money is, I'm always drawn to taking a rifle course, right? But it's one of those things, it's harder for me to justify as a civilian because I don't, where I see myself using the rifle in a defensive situation is a little bit lower on my list of likely scenarios. Do you find that part of the reason when you were talking about your law enforcement students and how they just receive a higher benefit and a higher skill set from it, is it because if we look at a law enforcement officer or civilian, the likelihood that a LEO is going to go into a situation with his rifle is much greater than myself, right? They're responding to a call where they might anticipate needing a rifle. And I guess are you seeing, if you were to put a percentage on your student breakdown, is it 60% LE, 40% the Joe civilian? What is that course breakdown like?
Overall, I would say it's about 80% non-law enforcement that come through that particular course. The one that we did up in Tennessee over at Bud's Guns, that was a bit of an anomaly. I think we had 6 of your guys from Gwinnett there. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so they made up a good majority of the course in that instance, but that's very, very unusual. The good majority of folks that come through are non-LE. And I think there's a distinct reason for that, in that people are starting to see, if the opportunity is there, if you know definitively that you may be getting into a deadly force encounter, picking up a carbine is a pretty good idea. It is an absolute game changer when it comes to two-way deadly force going on. You need to look no further than Stephen Williford. That's one of the cases that I actually utilize during the class to talk about lessons that he learned during his incident, like, keeping the gun in an operational mode, having at least a loaded magazine sitting in the gun so that when you go to pick it up out of the safe, it's ready to go. You're not having to stuff a mag as you're walking out of the door barefoot. Not in any way, shape, or form disparaging what that man did. That man is an absolute American hero, but we have to learn those lessons from folks that have been through it.
No, absolutely, and that makes sense, right? And we had Jared Reston on last week, and he was shot 7 times with a handgun.
With a 45.
With a 45, it's the Lawrence caliber, right?
Yep.
That's the man stopper. Shot 7 times and was able to survive that altercation and put the shooter down. And it's one of those things where I don't think people truly understand how ineffective pistols are at stopping the bad guy. And it's it's the most convenient firearm to carry. And then we could talk about, or we could debate for hours whether it's the shotgun or the rifle that's the thing that we should have in a gunfight.
Oh yeah.
So let's talk about. I want to kick it back over to Tim for a minute, and I want Tim to talk to us a little bit about. It sounds like the student makeup in the class that he attended, the first one back in March, was him and quite a few of his law enforcement partners. Mm-hmm. Tim, is there anything that you saw, either yourself or some other students in that class, struggling to do or perform, right? Was there a common obstacle that students were having?
So in terms of struggling to perform, I would just say that we were definitely pushed to an extent to get comfortable with the uncomfortable nature sometimes of rifle deployments and the environment you would potentially be using them in. Working around a kind of a crowded range of, in this case, it was the rest of the classmates kind of going up and down the line, making sure the muzzle is in a safe direction, definitively up, definitively down, but then, stopping, engaging your targets according to, different levels of confirmation that you had available, whatever type of shot you were trying to take. That presented a challenge. And then at the end with the stage that we ran, the mock stage, truly adding in that dynamic movement and then still being able to apply everything we had been working on up to that point. It upped the challenge factor, but I didn't think it was anything in terms of an obstacle that couldn't be overcome. I mean, Gil explains everything. You practice this. You never felt like you were lost in the weeds with any of these topics because you repped it out enough that you understood how to apply the concepts. Yes, you're going to have a lot of homework when you leave the class to keep working on your own time, but nothing was insurmountable.
Gil, do you find that there's a theme for students, and maybe it's with your the civilian students or the law enforcement students? Is there a theme of obstacles or challenges or a myth that they come into class kind of believing that you find yourself kind of having to work through or talk through with your folks?
I think just overall, most folks don't know exactly what it is they need, right? I always go back to the one piece of knowledge that I could look at my POI and say, man, this is an absolute must. Every single person, regardless of their level of skill and experience that are coming through, this is the one thing that is going to help them, would be the body mechanics portion of it. Believe it or not, even I've had very experienced martial artists, people that do Muay Thai, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. They know exactly how the body works. They know the most efficient way to deliver and absorb energy. And even them, when they start looking at these concepts and these principles from a firearms perspective, you start seeing light bulbs go off everywhere. So if anything, I think the body mechanics, which is also one of my favorite topics, is more than likely where I see most folks across the board from the standpoint of experience. I think that's where they're missing the most.
One of the things that I'll see with students, again, it's on the handgun platform, right? It's our handgun students, is they're overdoing it, right? Like they feel like they have to have all of this tension built in, and it's got to be like this rigid structure. And it's like, hey man, it's not that, right? Like you're making it a lot harder. Yeah, exactly. Right. It's not that complicated. And I could charge you a little bit more money and make it a little bit more complicated and make you feel good about paying me more money, but it's simple. Right. And it's, again, I have limited skill set, limited knowledge base on the AR-15 or the rifle platform. So it's interesting to hear you talk about body mechanics and how important it is. Do you find that, a student that's really dialed in on the handgun, because I'd imagine you have some high level students on the handgun that come over and take your rifle course. Do you find that they need to shift what they're doing or change any bit of their body mechanics that works well for them with the handgun, but might not be as beneficial to them on the rifle platform?
Not at all. As a matter of fact, I find the exact opposite. I think folks that are familiar with pistol and do well with pistol, once we start introducing the nomenclature of the body mechanics that we're utilizing on the carbine, connecting the dots is very, very easy. As a matter of fact, when it comes to just the gun handling itself, I make it a point to show them just how similar the operations of a semi-automatic pistol and a semi-automatic rifle like the AR-15 platform is, by explaining that the charging handle is nothing more than the slide on the pistol, right? You've got your manual safety on an AR, no different than if you had one on a 2011 or an MMP or a SIG. And when it comes to pressures, right, the whole idea of grip pressures with pistol, we always say the support hand is the absolute anchor. That's where we want the majority of our pressures to come from. Well, it's no different than on a carbine. On a carbine, what's going to be pulling that gun into your body and actually creating that structure and support is your support side hand. I think it's very, very similar. And if you frame it in that fashion, it's a lot more digestible for the person who is the traditional pistol shooter. So at least that's what I found.
No, that makes sense. I like it. Tim, talk to us about your biggest takeaway or one of those light bulb moments that Gil was talking about.
So, yeah, I'm glad you kind of circled back to me on that one because, you know, what Gil was saying with students don't know what they need. And I take it a step further, you know, you don't know what you don't know. And then Gil, he demonstrated both in the MSP class and the technical carbine course when we talked about confirmations, different levels of confirmations, you know, aggressive, controlled, precise, and how all that translates. That was eye-opening for me the first time I heard it in the pistol course, and then applying it to the rifle course. I was like, this is what, how when I practice on my own, I get a few, you know, an hour here or there to kind of train. I run drills that force me to think in terms of confirmations and, you know, how aggressive can I run whatever platform I'm running, whether it's pistol or rifle, to get that same consistent, repeatable, predictable type of behavior that I'm looking for. And that was, you know, those lessons and those respective courses were amazing and eye-opening. I'd never heard anything phrased like that before, which, you know, again, I've done a little bit of training outside of the county. You know, we're branching out more and more, and I know there's other instructors who have versions of that, but, you know, it was really well done by Gil.
Let's dig into that a little bit more, Gil. You know, we've seen in, you know, in the last year or so, you know, a couple of law enforcement officers deploy the rifle and make really, you know, highly precise, high consequence shots at distance. Are you seeing a greater emphasis from the students on being able to use the AR-15 platform at distance and maybe less of the close range stuff? And kind of how do you marry those in the training session?
So in this course is kind of scalable in that we can put it on at a range that does have upwards of 100, 150 yards and use every single inch of that range. Or we can do it at an indoor range like we did in this instance, where we only had, I think it was a 25, 30 yard availability for shooting. The way we, and yes, to answer your question, yes, folks, when they go to the carbine platform, when you tell them, hey, we're going to be shooting 25 yards and in, they're like, hey, this is pistol distance. Until we actually get into the meat and potatoes. Oh, excuse me. Until we get into the meat and potatoes of the POI and we start talking about things like confirmation levels and understanding that when it comes to the level of difficulty for a target, distance really doesn't matter. What matters is the perceived size of the target. And that's where the confirmation levels and the ACP method of confirmation levels, making a decision today in practice while you're at the range and deciding if I've got a target at this level of difficulty, whether it's an aggressive level, a controlled level, or a precise level, I've got a process that I'm going to put in place. And I know exactly the way I'm going to shoot that level of difficulty or that level of target difficulty. And that's buried back in the CPU, if you will. That's going on in the background. Now that gives me the opportunity to have that bandwidth that I normally would have utilized by getting on sites and going, okay, how do I need to shoot this? And knowing immediately what I need to do. This way we have a pre-programmed response regardless of what type of target that we encounter. One thing that I like to kind of expand on with that concept is that it's not just about the target. It's also about other environmental factors like the disaster factor of, while it may not be a distance shot, you might be at 6 or 7 yards, but is the suspect holding a child? Does the suspect have a couple of hostages on either side? These are things that we've seen over and over and over again, not just in law enforcement engagements, but also active shooting engagements where non-law enforcement responders were there to intervene. I would rather that you learn that in class, in your own practice and training, than you trying to figure that out in the middle of the fight. That does not make any sense in any way, shape, or form for you to be evaluating the way you should be shooting. That should be something that you actually have pre-programmed into you. And that's what the confirmation levels is all about. And me personally, I would agree with Tim. That is one of the things that has absolutely changed shooting for me personally from a developmental standpoint.
One of my biggest gripes, as I've gotten into a greater role as a student and instructor, is there's this, there's kind of this sense, specifically with handgun training, that I've seen that, the 3 yards, 3 seconds, 3 rounds, it kind of makes the conversation about sights irrelevant. And one of the things for me is like, hey man, that might be 99% of the self-defense shootings out there, right? But that doesn't mean it's zero, right? There's a greater than 0% chance that you're going to need to take an aimed, precise shot to save your life or the life of somebody else. And if in that moment you don't know how to use your sights, well, you're screwed.
Absolutely.
However, if you know how to use your sights and you could take that precise shot, but you don't need to, there's no negative consequence for it. Do you see that same kind of sentiment with regards to rifles, or is there an understanding that, hey, this is typically used for a longer distance, so it's probably going to be a reduced target size, so there's an understanding that sights on rifles are important and how to use them is important?
So I'll take it one step further. A concept that I try to give to my clients when I train with them is the fact that if we are going at distance, if we are training to actually engage a precise target and do that as urgently as we possibly can, and we get really, really good with that, with those very high levels of difficulty targets, well, guess what? When you're back at that 3 rounds, 3 yards, and 3 seconds, it makes it an easy day. Makes it a very, very easy day. So that's something I have encountered that in the past. Not so much in open enrollment courses. I've encountered that in a couple of private training sessions. And I've also encountered that in some private conversations that I've had with, believe it or not, with competitive shooters.
Yeah, competitive shooters are a different breed.
Some of them are, yeah.
Yeah. It's like, man, how the hell are you doing that headbox bill drill, you jerk? Tim, I want to talk to you a little bit about how have you adjusted your training sessions or your practice sessions after taking the Technical Carbine Skills course?
So, again, I had the privilege of doing it as a student and, for personal development, and then trying to explore those concepts on my off time or own time to how do I deliver this material to the masses so that they have a similar understanding of these concepts and can, train on their own and just keep the snowball effect going of developing more competent shooters. My training sessions are, like I said before, they're built around having different target difficulty levels at different distances, and then just exploring what I can consistently get away with confirmation wise. Maybe a target that was once only that precise level of confirmation. Now it's getting to be more controlled, or trying to push a controlled level to a more aggressive level and have the same accountability. That's how I see growth. And, also training, using a shot timer, having some metric to track your progress is important. Gil, very methodical, he'll tell you words matter, right? And it just feeds into his process of how he teaches shooting, and in turn you become a very process driven shooter, or at least you should. If you're being responsible about this material you're receiving, you should want to focus on, do I have a process, or am I just stepping up and winging it every time I mount a rifle or draw a pistol? Because if you're doing that, you're going to stay at an amateur level. If you want to be a professional level, you've got to be process driven. So that's how I try to treat all of my training sessions, and then how I teach as well.
In the Range Buddy app, there's within those drills you can go and you can look at, and one of those is going to be there are categories for accurate shooting or precise shooting, and then there are others for making sure drills that kind of focus on your grip and your follow-up shot speed. Gil, talk to us a little bit about how, for me as an instructor, I see there's this kind of idea that folks will shoot new shooters will shoot way too fast, and you got to slow them down. And I found that that's the opposite, right? Like it's very difficult to get students to go as fast as they're able to accurately shoot, let alone go faster than they can accurately shoot. And when you're talking about the different levels of confirmation and the ACP, right, the aggressive, the controlled, and the precise, do you find that it's more difficult to get students to be more aggressive on the trigger, or is it harder to get them to be deliberate and precise?
Man, so a couple of things with that. First and foremost, I think it is a very individual thing. You're going to have folks in class who are the 3-yard sniper, if you will. They just can't help themselves but to put the round after round after round into the same hole, regardless of how long it takes and regardless of what the established criteria for the drill were. That's just what they want to do. And then you've got the Ricky Bobbies, the ones that want to just plug away at the trigger. And at least for the time being, it's almost as if they don't really care about hitting the target in one way, shape, or form, right? But going back to the idea of folks compartmentalizing both accuracy and speed, that's actually one of the things that I really enjoy doing. And I think I do a good job of priming folks for the confirmation levels and accepting that, hey, this is what you're going to do in order to set yourself up for success for these types of shots, by compartmentalizing those two ideas of speed and accuracy. And I was first exposed to this by Steve Anderson of Anderson Shooting, who absolutely changed the game for me on compartmentalizing and isolating training and really defining what success is. And I utilize things like speed mode training versus accuracy mode training. And I'm very, very specific to explain to everyone that's there, hey, this is our definition of success, and this is the reason why we're doing this. We're looking to do nothing more than to distill our skill set and get speed gains. And then we go back into optimal performance mode, where we bring things together. And historically, say 90 to 95%, everybody, or 90 to 95% will see a distinct increase or decrease in the speed that it's taking them. I usually do this with the draw, if you will, right? And that kind of convinces people, okay, I can actually, instead of, as Tim alluded to earlier, instead of me going up there and winging it and going, man, I'm going to throw a hoper there and see if it actually hits a target, I can actually dictate exactly the way I train, so that if I want to get faster, I drive into that speed mode, and then I come back into optimal performance mode. And now I can dictate exactly the way I want to shoot by falling back on my confirmation levels. That's the one way that I've found it to be really easy to deal with the folks that are the 3-yard sniper, as well as Ricky Bobby, giving them a roadmap. And that's kind of, as a coach, that's kind of what I see as my job or my mission, is to actually inspire the folks that are training with me, for them to utilize those concepts on their own, in their own training, and holding themselves accountable. because I can't be there all the time. And I'm damn sure not going to be there more than likely when they're involved in a deadly force encounter. It's going to be on them.
You know, while we're on the topic of training and practice sessions, I wanted to reiterate or talk again briefly about our sponsors, the Range Buddy app. Again, that's a collection of a ton of drills on there. Not a ton, over 160, quite a bit. There's a training session tracker in there, which, you know, Andy and I were out on the range one day shooting bill drills. And I'm like, man, I can't remember how well I did the last time we were shooting bill drills. And he was like, man, you're working on that app. Why don't you include something in there so that, you know, we have the training session tracker in there. It also ranks you on a leaderboard against other folks that shoot that. And then the locked in grip is the other thing that I find has kind of really helped me alleviate or eliminate some unnecessary stress, or not anxiety. I don't want to call it anxiety, right? But it gives me one less thing to worry about, right? Because I'm not worried about my hands getting all sweaty. I found that I re-grip my gun quite a bit less. Is there anything, Tim, that you have found, and also ties into a Facebook post that I've seen that I was in the deliberate training group today, Gil, that I don't know if you saw that one. They were talking about, you know, things that you bring to your range to kind of make things easier. And everybody was loving somebody had mentioned a paracord, right? They have a 25-yard piece of paracord with knots at different distances at 3, 5, 7, 10, 15, and 20, 25. And I was like, oh man, that's a really good idea. And then Memphis, one of the things that he had talked about bringing was a squib rod, and I forget what the other thing, but I was like, man, those are some good things that I need to add to my range bag. So Tim, is there anything that you have found that has improves your range session that maybe folks don't think about that you would recommend taking to this class or another class? Andy always mentions the speed loader, the UpLula.
Yeah, we've taken those to some of the classes, you know, various speed loaders. I just ultimately fall back on hand loading, but having my set of fix-it sticks is huge. Yeah, because I had issues with my rifle in Gil's class, and kind of having my own toolkit right there to fix any problem was a must-have. But props or anything to kind of assist, yeah. I'm a little bit different because most of my training happens already in our department's indoor range, where we just have access to a lot of stuff. So I don't know that I'm the best one to answer that question.
Fix-it sticks, that's a great recommendation. What would you recommend? Yeah, and how often do on handguns we got to worry about like sights falling off or the red dot falling off? Gil, is there anything?
We're always fixing something.
So when it comes to red dots, absolutely. We have one come loose at the very least, if not fall off of the gun completely, in almost every single class. When it comes to carbine stuff, this is an absolute must in my opinion. You got to have extra parts. Charging handles have gone down. I've had bolts actually, the extractor completely disintegrate and come off. I've had bolt carrier groups break and lock the gun up completely. What else have we had go bad? Optics falling off, handguards coming loose, stocks coming loose with because the castle nuts weren't staked. These are all things that we need to think about, because that can really ruin, if not completely end, your training day. If there doesn't happen to be an extra rifle, which I try to bring, depending on what type of travel I'm doing, I try to bring at least one extra rifle, not just so that I can have it, but in the event that we have a client that has their rifle go down and they need one, they can continue shooting. So a backup gun is an absolute must if you can swing it. Some folks can't, some folks can't. But above and beyond that, I would say that comfort items are really, really important, especially when you are training outdoors. Things like hydration, having snacks, having something that's going to keep your mind, body, and just your cognitive ability going throughout the day. I can tell you right now, for me personally, I've noticed this at matches. If we are running through a hot day at a match and I don't do a whole lot of drinking, my vision gets really, really bad. It gets very, very difficult for me to lock into a specific point on the target. And that just comes from not being hydrated well. So those would be the things that I would say that off the top of my head would be important to me.
So it sounds like there's a greater thing, or a greater amount of things that could go wrong on the AR pistol or the AR rifle in a class. Do you find that it's at home gunsmithing that leads to a lot of that stuff, where folks are just you're not using, Loctite, or they're not staking? Where is all this stuff coming from? Or is it just wear and tear on the rifle that kind of shows itself in a 2-day class?
So most of the time it's wear and tear. There are instances, and it's one of the reasons why we have a conversation on maintenance and upkeep of equipment. Sometimes it is just people being lackadaisical and thinking that, since the carbine survived the last 10 or 12 200 round range sessions, that it's going to be okay for an 800 round 2-day training session, which those are two completely different animals, from the standpoint of putting a load on the actual piece of kit and anything that might be attached to it. And it's something that you have to check every single day that you come back. Day 2 of the carbine course and of my RDS courses, I always try to throw a reminder out there and kind of ask folks, hey, did you check your screws? Did you make sure that you torqued everything down? And if we have somebody that says, no, I also have a set of fixed sticks that I believe in, and I'll toss those to them as well. They are invaluable in my opinion. I would much rather have that preventative maintenance keep somebody from having a piece of kit go down during the day. But I will say that it is a very powerful learning experience to have that happen to you personally. It's something that you want to make sure that never happens again, because you realize, heck, it possibly couldn't have been here at this moment in training. It could be during an engagement when I actually need it. So weapons maintenance is very important. Again, it goes back to the basics.
Yeah. One of the things that I took a 2-day class with Tim Herron a couple of years ago, and I was having some mag issues, and I was like, man, it was a 3-day class. I didn't do anything with my gun or mag after day 1. After day 2, towards the end, it started showing up, and I was like, man, what an idiot, right? Like, for me, if you're doing a 1,500, you're putting 500 rounds, how many times are your mags getting dumped onto the concrete or the dirt, right? So spray the mags out, lube your gun up. You don't have to do, field strip it, clean it, put a couple drops of lube on there. Will go a long way. But after that training, after that 2-day class or 3-day class, it's important to get it back up to snuff, right? Clean it. Yeah, you don't need to necessarily do this. Oh, let me run. I'm going to put another 2,000 rounds on it before I clean it, because you don't get to choose if or when the gun goes down, or if and when you need it, right? Like that. Very luckily, right, that bolt carrier group could have went down 300 rounds later, after the class, and it wouldn't have been caught or wouldn't have been realized. So make sure you're taking care of your stuff and getting it back up to snuff, and especially if your life is going to depend on it. That was one of those things where it's like, man, I should take a little bit better care of my guns.
Man, it's what a true craftsman does.
Yeah, so Andy used to, well, we still do, right? Like my Glock 48 or whatever, the gun that I use out there on the range with our students, and I talk about, I don't clean it nearly as enough. I clean it often enough, but not enough as I should probably, because I don't prescribe to the, hey, after 200 rounds or 300 rounds, it's typically more of a timing issue for me. It's like, hey, I have an extra couple hours. And then, but one of the things that I noticed is my dot, I got to send my dot off for a maintenance or repair on it. It's the brightness is not what it is. It's probably 20% as bright as it used to be. It's not a battery issue.
Which manufacturer?
It's a Hollison 507.
Interesting.
Yeah. So I'm sure they'll take care of it. They were real good to me last time I had a user issue, right? I was like, hey, the dot is blinking. And I reached out to them. They didn't know what was causing it. So I reached out to somebody else. Their customer service got back in touch with me. They said, "Hey, send it in. We'll check it out." So they sent me a new one, and come to find out, that means it's a low battery indicator. But people at their office, they didn't realize that either.
Interesting.
Am I muted? Can you hear me?
No, we got you. We got you.
Okay. Yeah. So because I searched and there's a couple different groups and they're like, yeah, I don't know what's causing that. And sure enough, it's a low battery indicator. I run mine typically the brightest level, thanks to taking a class with Tom Givens, and we were doing the casino drill, and it washed out. Right. And here in Albuquerque, New Mexico, we have bright sunny days.
And that is not the drill you want your sighting system to wash out on.
No, it's not. It took me a second or two to realize it, and I'm pretty sure it's the only drill that he runs where line breaks don't count, because I had one flyer and it was a line break, and he was like, "Nope."
Yep.
I was like, "Son of a gun." So Tim, I want to talk a little bit more about, you said your department pays for and sends you guys off to get training. Is that something that's open to anybody in the department? Or is there a selection process for that? And then
yeah, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Generally the department has X amount of dollars set aside for training in general for the uniform division. However, they decide to approve that process. You submit paperwork, justify why that would be a benefit to the county to attend that training. And if the chain of command agrees, it's paid for, hotel, per diem, travel, all that. My unit, we have 8 firearms instructors. Now we kind of grew a little bit with some part-timers and the new instructors, but we have at the training center our own budget, and we try to send everybody in the training section to at least one outside type of instruction every year. Sometimes we get to go more, just kind of depends on the budget and the cost for travel and everything. But yeah, it's amazing, because I know not every agency is that fortunate to get that opportunity, but they push us out there to try to harvest good information to make our troops safer.
That's awesome. That's really cool to hear. I think we've had 1 or 2 other guests on it. They've worked for similar agencies, but quite a few of our student guests that work in law enforcement, they're footing the bill. So that's cool that your department is paying for it, at least having the opportunity. What piece of advice would you give somebody who is signing up for this class and is going to take it next month?
Bring a notepad, right? Just go there with the open mind, and something that Gil likes to say that I wholeheartedly believe in. Show up with the expectation that at some point you're going to fail, right? You got to chase progress, not perfection. When you go to these courses, you learn from where your process falls apart the most. So don't be afraid to, we talk about that 3-yard line sniper that just wants to keyhole shots. Don't be afraid to push it. Explore at speed, what's working, what's not working. And at some point you'll be able to recognize how to fix things at speed, which is huge, because if we're talking self-defense shooting, whatever type law enforcement shooting, everybody's going to shoot a bill drill at grandmaster speeds, but have never practiced, never understood the concepts that allow you to do that and perform well. So go with the expectation that you're going to be pushed beyond what you're comfortable doing, and that's fine. You're going to learn the most from that, and then write down notes. Don't be when the instructor's up there teaching, have that pen and pad in hand trying to take down this material. So at some point when you're digesting everything and trying to get as much into that long-term memory as you can, you have something to pull back, refer to, and then just take it with you going forward as you practice on your own. Every training class I've ever attended, it's called homework. You're not going to walk away in a 2-day class going from an A-class shooter to an M-class shooter, but you're going to have the homework that if you follow the process, you can get there. So that's what I would suggest.
That's great advice. Gil, I want to kick that same question back to you. What advice do you have for students that are about to take this class?
Man, just come in with an open mind. Tim hit the nail on the head. Everything else can be worked with, as long as you have an open mind. And I can tell you from experience, right? A lot of the stuff that I will say, hey, we do it this way because it's the most efficient way to do it. I probably taught it the opposite way for quite a few years and found out that it wasn't the most efficient or the best way to do things. So I tell folks all the time, I don't just ask my clients to come to me with an open mind. I, as an instructor, I, as a coach, also have an open mind, and I'm constantly working on my own personal development as well. So I know what that process is like, and I want to serve up on a platter every bit of information that I possibly can, that I've vetted and I've gone down the rabbit holes on, to just give over to the folks that are trusting me with building their skill set. So just come in with an open mind, look to have fun, understand that you are not going to do everything perfectly. And the fact that that is not just something that's going to happen, but it's something that needs to happen in order for you to get to that next level, to bust through that next plateau.
As an instructor, it's one of these things, the more and more that I do it, right, I find myself getting kind of, there are certain repetitive questions that we see come up. And one of those things, kind of hearing you and Tim answer that last question, it got me thinking about, what does success look like for an instructor at the end of a class? And because it's easy for us to right, we adjust our course, we adjust our curriculum, and we do all that stuff, but a lot of the big milestones for that class are going to remain pretty constant. So it's easy, once you do it 10 or 15 times, to kind of just kind of end the 2-day class and kind of prepare for the next one. But what does success look like for you as an instructor at the end of the Technical Carbine Skills course?
Man, at the end of the Technical Carbine Skills course, the definition of success, in my opinion, is seeing people do things that they legitimately did not think were going to work out the way that it did, right? Having them turn around and go, man, the mounting of the carbine just made this transition or this particular array so much easier. And knowing and understanding that, as I stated earlier, I look at my job as inspiring people to go down their own rabbit holes and understand that training is not just a straight line journey. Like, you're going to revisit things over and over and over again and see them in a completely new light. And when you see that, particularly it happens during the stage run. At the end of the day, you'll see a lot of those light bulb moments happen. And it's not during a drill that you came up with. It's not during a conversation that you're having. It is their own realization, the student's realization, that they are putting into place everything that they just worked on for the last 2 days, and seeing that light in their eyes and knowing, yeah, this person's going to take this back and they are going to run with it when they get home. That's what really inspires me as a coach.
Man, that was I had a light bulb moment right there, right? Because you said it. It's when you see them do when you see them realize that they can do something that they thought they couldn't do, right? And that's got to be, for me, one of the greatest feelings, right? It's when it's like, whether it's just one of those things where it's, how empowering is that for a student to realize that they just did the impossible. 15 minutes ago, there's no way I could do that. It was impossible for them. And you showed them, right, that they are able to do that. And the level of empowerment that we see students get from that, it's almost like they leave with a little bit of a chip on their shoulder.
Exactly.
And we talked to, when we talked to Cecil Birch and a couple other, BJJ practitioners, one of the things they say is like, put your daughter, William April, I used to say, put your daughters and get them into jiu-jitsu, because they will walk with the swagger, right? It changes them. The confidence that you bestow upon somebody through the skill set of, here this is a tool that you may have to use to defend yourself, to save your life or somebody else, and you were apprehensive about it and you doubted yourself, and then you proved yourself wrong. That's pretty cool, man. And I don't think there's a better definition of success. But I'm going to let Tim try. Tim, but let's do it from a student's perspective, right? As a student, you just wrapped up a 2-day class. What is it that is like, man, that was worth my 2 days. That was worth, 16 hours in the travel.
For sure. Again, to me, it was leaving with a greater sense of confidence and competence running a rifle, being exposed to these topics I had never, I have never explored them before that class. And then seeing a level of performance in that mock stage where I was like, hot damn, like there's some potential out there. We clearly haven't even come close to a ceiling, but man, we know where we can go from here. And I think it instills a sense of passion in you when you start to take these little bites of competence, and you're like, okay, I kind of know what I'm doing. So it's going to make me more passionate about the topic, which makes me want to train harder. So that is, to me, what I took away from Gil, both of those classes, the MSP, the pistol course, the rifle course, just the flame was lit and, just been pursuing progress since those.
Where do you think this course, the Technical Carbine Skills course, should fall on a student's continuum of training?
I would at least say have a basic, have some basic level of rifle training so that these concepts of the fundamentals are not completely new to you. But once you have a little bit of, a couple hours of exposure here and there, or had some individual coaching, then jump in and take it, because you're not going to get lost. You're just going to get all these drills, these ideas that are going to reinforce what you kind of already knew. And then again, just kind of taking them on the back end, taking them and running with them in your own training. It's only going to be to your benefit. Do I think it's for a day one student? I mean, I don't know that I can answer that. I would think you would need a day one type shooter's perspective, but Gil is not going to embarrass you or make you feel like you don't belong there. If you have the basics of the handling of the rifle, he's going to get you coached up. You're going to learn something.
Gil, did you want to expand on that? Where do you think it should fall on the students, or could fall on the students?
So one of the things that I pride myself on as a coach is my ability to be able to meet people at their level, right? So I've had a gamut of different experience levels in a number of open enrollment courses, and I was able to manage that fairly easily, giving each individual what they needed from the standpoint of feedback and an understanding of what we were trying to accomplish, and how they, with their skill set and where they were, what they should expect from themselves. The one thing that I cannot do is bypass safety, right? Safe gun handling and responsible gun handling is something that, particularly in an open enrollment environment, in a private training session, that's something that's very easily fixed and addressed. Mm-hmm. But during an open enrollment course, you just don't have the time. And to be quite honest with you, the consequence of something going wrong with a room full of people with guns in their hands, it's just not worth it. So that would be my only concern from the standpoint of kind of people putting this into a particular spot in the continuum is, hey, you got to at least be able to handle that gun responsibly the entire time. Know and understand how to load and unload it. And probably the most important part is knowing the condition of the firearm at all times. That is a non-negotiable item. anything above and beyond that is something that we can handle on the line.
And I know we're pushing midnight where you guys are at, so I want to wrap this up. But before we do, I'm going to ask the laziest question in podcasting. Is there anything that we should have talked about, or is there anything I should have asked that we didn't touch on regarding this course?
Not off the top of my head, man. I think we covered it pretty good. What do you think, Tim?
Nothing I can think of.
Good deal. Well, on that note, I'll give you guys the rest of your evening back. I definitely appreciate y'all jumping on and giving us a couple hours of your time this evening and really sharing the insight and your expertise with us and our listeners and our viewers. Remember, it's your life. It's your safety and protection. It's your responsibility. Y'all stay safe, and we'll see you next week.